The sky turned red on a Tuesday morning. Commander Jiwan stood in the observation room of Fortress 7 and watched the ships come. They were not like anything humans had ever built. These vessels hung in space like massive clouds of dark metal, their surfaces moving and shifting as if they were alive. The radio signals came first, strange sounds that made the equipment scream and spark. Then the silence. That silence was worse than any noise. Ji-Wan was a tall woman with gray hair and hard eyes. She had spent 40 years in the military, and she had learned that silence before an attack always meant the worst was coming. She pressed her hand against the cold glass of the window and thought about the 6 million people sleeping in the fortress deep below her feet. They had no idea what was about to happen to their world. The Kalian Empire was real. For years, the governments of Earth had whispered about the possibility of life beyond the stars, but they had pushed these thoughts away. It seemed too dangerous. It seemed too impossible. But now, as those massive ships moved into position around Earth's orbit, denial became a luxury no one could afford anymore. In a military station above the Pacific Ocean, an alarm began to scream. Within minutes, that alarm reached every corner of the planet. The announcement came cold and quick. Unidentified vessels have entered Earth's atmosphere. All personnel are ordered to remain in protected areas immediately. People screamed. They ran. Some prayed. Some tried to run toward the sky as if they could do anything against ships that could block out the sun. The first weapon the Kalians used was not fire or explosives. It was something far more terrible. From the ships, a fine mist descended. It looked almost beautiful at first, like silver powder falling through the air. It caught the morning light and sparkled as it came down. But within the hour, people began to collapse. In the cities, in the villages, in hospitals and homes, people fell to the ground as if their bones had turned to water. The sickness came fast. The virus, which would later be named the Cascade virus, attacked the human brain. It rewrote the pathways that made people think and feel and remember. Those who were infected lost their minds before they lost their lives. Mothers forgot their children. Doctors forgot how to work. Soldiers could not remember their orders. Within 12 hours, 3 billion people were infected. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, inside a structure carved into living rock, Commander Ji-Wan received the reports. Each one was worse than the last. Cities were falling silent. Governments were collapsing. The world's greatest hospitals could do nothing. The virus was spreading at a speed that made no sense. It moved through the air, through water, through any contact between people. There was no cure. There was no defense. There was only the slow darkness of the mind breaking apart. Ji-Wan made the decision to seal Fortress 7. The massive doors, thick as mountains and made of metal that could survive nuclear fire, slammed shut. Outside, people screamed and begged to be let inside. Ji-Wan stood in the command center and listened to their voices on the radio. She felt something break inside her chest. But she did not change her orders. If the fortress fell, humanity would have no chance at all. Inside the fortress, 3,000 scientists and doctors began to work. They had samples of the virus now, taken from the first infected people to reach the gates. It was beautiful under the microscope, a perfect spiral of crystal and organic matter. And it was absolutely deadly. Every test they did showed the same thing. The virus would infect 100% of exposed humans. The virus would kill 98% of them within 72 hours. But there was something strange. In the Kalian ships that had crashed during Earth's defense attempts, the scientists found something impossible. There were bodies, not human bodies, but something else. These creatures were tall and thin, with skin that shone like polished metal. They had died too. The Cascade virus had killed them as well. This was supposed to be an invasion, but the weapon the Kalians had used was killing them as much as it was killing humans. Then the message came. It came on a frequency that should have been impossible to access. It was in perfect English, but spoken with an accent that was neither human nor fully alien. The voice was female, soft but strong. "My name is Minhai. I am a messenger from inside the Kalian fleet. I do not have much time. They are looking for me now, but I needed you to know something important. The Cascade virus is not what they told you it was. It was not meant to conquer your world. It was meant to be controlled, to be turned off when your people surrendered. But something has happened. The virus is spreading to my people now. It is not stopping." "The Kalian command does not understand what is happening. They are afraid, and when they are afraid, they will destroy everything to keep control." Ji-won listened to this voice in the darkness of the fortress. She knew she should not believe it. Everything about it could be a trick, a way to make humans lower their guard. But something in that voice was true. Something in it was real. "I am coming to your fortress," the voice continued. "I can help you make the antidote. I know the structure of the virus better than anyone. I know how to stop it, but I cannot explain this now. I can only ask you to trust me. The world has 72 hours before the cascade reaches critical mass. You have that long to save everyone. I am coming to help you. And I am coming because I have made a choice that will cost me everything." The transmission ended. Ji-won stood in her command center, surrounded by screens showing the dying world outside. She looked at her officers. They looked back at her with fear in their eyes. She had to make a choice. Let an alien into the last human fortress on Earth, or turn away the only person who might know how to save them all. "Open the lower gates," Ji-won said quietly, "and prepare the isolation chambers. If this is a trick, we will all die anyway, but if it is not a trick, then maybe we have a chance." As the sun set over the ocean, a small ship descended through the clouds. It was Kalian technology, but it was not coming to attack. It was coming to save. And in that moment, the fate of human civilization rested on the decision of one woman to believe in the impossible. The landing bay was silent as the Kalian ship touched down on the metal floor. Guards stood everywhere, weapons ready, their fingers tight on triggers. Ji-won stood behind reinforced glass in a control room above them. If Min-hai was a threat, these guards had orders to kill her immediately. But Ji-won knew that would solve nothing. If the message was real, and if the antidote was possible, then killing the messenger would be the death of the entire human race. The ship's door opened slowly. No one emerged for a long moment. Then finally, she stepped out into the light. Min-hai was not what anyone had expected. She was not a monster or a great invader. She was a woman, nearly 6 feet tall, with skin that held colors like oil on water, silver and blue and green shifting across her surface. Her eyes were large and bright, perfectly round like 2 moons. When she moved, it was with a strange grace, as if she did not quite feel the weight of her own body. Her hair was long and white, but not the white of age. It was the white of something that had never lived among sunlight. She wore robes made of something that looked like metal but moved like cloth, and around her neck hung a device that glowed with a soft red light. "I am Min-hai," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, and every word sounded carefully chosen. "I come without weapons. I come to help. I know what you fear. I have the same fears. We are running out of time." One of the guards moved forward. He was young, maybe 20 years old, with anger burning in his eyes. His name was Teo, and he believed that no alien could ever help humanity. "You are going to tell us everything," he said, raising his weapon toward Min-hai's head. "You are going to tell us where the other ships are. You are going to tell us how to kill them all." Min-hai did not flinch. She looked at Teo with those strange eyes, and something in that look made even the young soldier pause. "If I tell you where the other ships are, You will use weapons that will only make the virus spread faster. The Kalian command expects this. They have prepared for your response. Your weapons will not work against them, and every moment you waste trying will kill more people out there." She pointed upward, toward the world dying above them. Jiwon made a decision. She came down from the observation room and walked across the landing bay until she stood face to face with the alien woman. This was insane. This was dangerous. But it was also the only chance left. "You said you can help us make an antidote," Jiwon said. It was not a question. "Yes," Minhai replied, "but not alone. You need a scientist, someone brilliant, someone brave, someone who can understand what I am about to show them." Within an hour, they brought Minhai to the research level. The laboratories of Fortress 7 were the most advanced on the planet. Thousands of doctors and scientists worked here, trying to understand the virus with every tool humans had ever invented. They had made some progress. They had mapped the structure of the cascade virus. They had tried 17 different approaches to creating a cure. All of them had failed. The head of virology was a woman named Da-Un. She was only 32 years old, but her mind was like a diamond, sharp and clear and unbreakable. When she saw Min-Hai, her first reaction was fear. Her second reaction was curiosity. Her third reaction was to understand that this alien woman might be telling the truth. "Show me," Da-Un said simply. Min-Hai sat down at one of the computers. Her fingers moved in a strange way, as if she was touching things invisible to human eyes. Information began to flow across the screens. It was not just data. It was understanding. It showed the structure of the virus not as a lifeless thing, but as a living weapon designed with purpose and intelligence. Every line revealed how the virus worked. Every diagram showed its weaknesses. "The virus has two parts," Min-Hai explained. "The first part attacks the mind. It rewires the neurons. It makes people forget themselves. But the second part is the anchor. It is the thing that holds the first part in place. If you can destroy the anchor, the body's own immune system will clean away the rest." Dawn's eyes grew wide. "That is not how viruses work. That is not how biology works." "No," Min-Hai agreed. "That is not how Earth viruses work. But the Kalions do not come from Earth. We do things differently. And because we do things differently, the anchor is different. It uses proteins that your body will recognize as alien. Your immune system will attack it if you give it the right signal." For the next hours, the two women worked together. Da-Un was a brilliant scientist, but she had been trained by human knowledge. Min-Hai was something else entirely. She understood biology from a perspective that had developed among the stars. Together, they began to see the shape of a solution. But as they worked, something terrible began to happen to Min-Hai. The device around her neck, the one that glowed red, became brighter. Her skin started to shift and change. Her movements became less smooth. Her breathing became hard. "What is happening to you?" Da-Un asked. Min-Hai looked away. "The device is a control. The Kalians put it in every hybrid like me. It was meant to make sure I would never turn against them. But I have turned against them. I sent the message. I chose your people. Now the device is destroying me from the inside. It is releasing a version of the cascade virus directly into my body. A version made specifically for my biology." "How long do you have?" Da-Un whispered. 2 days, Min-Hai said. "Maybe less. As my body breaks down, the process will speed up. The irony is very clear to me. I am racing to save your species with the same weapon that is killing me. But that is the price I chose to pay when I decided to become human." Da-Un reached out and took Min-Hai's hand. The skin was warm, but with an odd texture, like touching water that was somehow solid. "Then we do not have time to waste. We have 24 hours. That is when the antidote will be ready, or never." And so they worked. In the depths of Fortress 7, While the world above them died in silence, two women, one human and one alien, raced against time itself. The clock was running down. For humanity. For Min-Hai. For everything. The fortress had become a city of whispers and fear. 6 million people lived inside the protective walls, breathing the same recycled air, eating the same rationed food, and slowly going mad with the knowledge that the world outside was dying. In the upper levels, people gathered around screens watching the news feeds from the surface. The broadcasts had stopped days ago, but the silence itself told a story. No more voices, no more cities, no more sun reflecting off living streets, just the sound of wind moving through empty places. Min-Hai had become a symbol of hope and a source of terror in equal measure. Half the fortress believed she was humanity's savior. The other half was certain she was a spy sent to destroy them all. The arguments had started small and grown into something dangerous. In the common areas, fights broke out between those who trusted the alien and those who did not. Ji-won had to send guards to separate them. The unity that had held the fortress together was starting to crack. The problem had a name, and that name was Teo. The young soldier had become the voice of doubt and suspicion. Every day he would go to different sections of the fortress and speak to the people. He would tell them about the war that humans had to win. He would tell them that trusting an alien was madness. He would tell them that Min-Hai's help was just a clever way to destroy humanity from inside. "She is one of them," Teo would say, his voice burning with conviction. "She is trained in the ways of deception. The Kalians built her as a weapon that looks human, a weapon that sounds kind. But she is still a weapon." Ji-won knew that Teo was popular because he was speaking to the fear that lived in everyone's heart. Fear was a powerful thing. It could make people believe almost anything. The commander held meetings with her officers to try to control the situation, but she could feel the ground shifting beneath the fortress. If she was not careful, the people inside Fortress 7 would become her enemy before the Kalians ever breached the gates. Down in the research laboratories, Da-eun and Min-Hai had no idea how close they were to disaster. They worked in a world of numbers and molecules and the pure hope of science. The antidote was taking shape. They had found the protein that would disrupt the anchor. They had tested it on infected tissue samples. The results were perfect. But perfect results meant nothing if they could not be delivered to the people who needed them. Min-Hai's condition was getting worse by the hour. The device around her neck was now glowing so bright it hurt to look at directly. Her skin had started to split in places, revealing something underneath that was neither human nor Kalian. It was something new, something broken. It was what happened when a being caught between two worlds was torn apart by both of them at once. "I do not have much longer," she said to Da-eun one evening. They were sitting in the small rest room attached to the laboratory. Min-Hai was no longer able to stand for extended periods. Her body was shutting down, section by section. Her hands trembled. Her breathing came in sharp gasps. "The mutation is accelerating. I can feel my mind starting to break. It is like watching yourself disappear piece by piece." Da-eun sat beside her and did something that was completely against every protocol of the fortress. She cried. The young scientist, who had spent her whole life hiding behind the armor of logic and reason, let herself feel the weight of what was happening. She was watching someone sacrifice themselves, and she was watching that sacrifice be repaid with betrayal from the people they were trying to save. "They do not understand," Da-eun said, her voice breaking. "They do not see what you are doing." "They are afraid," Min-Hai replied. "Fear makes blind. Fear makes cruel. I understand this. I come from a civilization that conquered with fear. I know how it works. In a few hours, when the mutation gets worse, I might become dangerous to be around. The danger will be real. So when they want to execute me, they will have good reasons. But the antidote will still be finished. That is what matters." but things moved faster than either of them expected. On the morning of day 3, guards came to the laboratory. They were led by Teo, and his face was hard with certainty. Behind him came more soldiers, and in the control center above, Ji-won watched on screens, her jaw clenched in frustration and concern. "Min-hai," Teo said, his weapon pointed at the alien woman's chest. "You are under arrest for conspiracy against humanity. You will submit to detention immediately, or you will be executed." Min-hai's eyes had changed color again. They were now burning with a mixture of silver and black. Her skin was flickering like a television with a broken signal. She was close to the final stage of the mutation. Close to the point where her mind would splinter into something that could no longer think in any way a human could understand. But Min-hai was not afraid. She stood up, her body shaking with the effort, and she looked directly at Teo. "I am submitting," she said quietly. "I will go to detention. But before I go, you need to know that the antidote is complete. It is finished. All you need to do is manufacture it and distribute it. That is your job now. That is humanity's job. Not to trust me, not to believe in me, just to finish what we started." Dawn stepped forward. "I can verify everything she says. The antidote is real. I have tested it. It works. We can save everyone if we—" "Silence," Teo commanded. He looked at Da-un with disappointment. "I always knew you were weak. I always knew you would choose a pretty lie over hard truth." As the guards took Min-hai away, she looked back at Da-un. Their eyes met for just a moment. In that moment, Min-hai tried to communicate something that could not be said in words. She tried to say that it was okay, that the sacrifice was worth it, that even if Teo executed her, even if humanity forgot her name, the antidote would live on, and that was enough. In the detention cell, Min-hai sat alone in the darkness. The device around her neck was now barely visible, consumed by the mutation that had spread across her entire body. She could feel the final hours approaching, but she could also feel something else, a warmth, a sense of peace that came from knowing that the choice she had made was the right one. She had come to a strange world. She had helped a species that was not her own, and soon she would become something else entirely, something that maybe humanity would one day understand. The fortress hummed with uncertainty around her. But in the laboratories, the antidote was real, and that was everything. The alarms screamed through Fortress 7 like voices of dying gods. The sensors showed what no one wanted to see. Kalian ships had descended from the upper atmosphere and were now moving directly toward the fortress. They had found it. The Kalian Empire had traced the signal. They were coming to finish what they had started. Teo saw the screens and felt a cold satisfaction spread through his chest. He had been right all along. The alien had betrayed them. Ji-won moved through the command center with the controlled calmness of someone who had trained their entire life for catastrophe. She gave orders without hesitation. "Seal all the upper levels. Divert power to the shield generators. Prepare the deep bunkers. And bring Min-hai to the command center now." Teo spun around to face her, his weapon raised. "Absolutely not. That creature stays in detention. She has already destroyed us. She has shown them where we are." "Her location was traced by her own people long before we brought her inside," Ji-won said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "If you believe she is a spy, then she accomplished nothing today that was not already known. But if she is what she claims to be, then we are about to need her. Either way, she comes." Before Teo could respond, the fortress shook. The impact of Kalian weapons hitting the outer defenses sent vibrations through every wall, every floor, every atom of the structure. Alarms that had just begun to quiet started screaming again, louder now, more urgent. People in the common areas began to scream. In the medical wings, patients fell from beds. In the schools, children huddled in designated shelter areas. Guards brought Min-hai to the command center. She was barely recognizable as the woman who had arrived just days before. Her body had transformed into something that was neither alive nor dead in any way that Earth biology could understand. Her skin was translucent now, revealing structures underneath that pulsed with a weak, fading light. Her eyes were completely black. Yet somehow she could still move. Somehow she could still think. Somehow she could still speak. "They have found me," she said, though her voice now sounded like wind moving through broken glass. "I am sorry. I did not think they would track me so quickly. The mutation must have accelerated the signal from my biology. I am a beacon now, a target." "How did you know this would happen?" Teo demanded, his weapon now pointing at her head. "How did you know they were coming?" "I knew the moment I sent the first message," Min-hai said calmly. "I knew that when I turned against the Kalian Empire, they would want me dead. I knew that they would not stop hunting me until my body was cold, but I did not care. The antidote was more important than my life. The future of your species was worth my death." Jiwon understood something then that she had never quite believed before. Min-hai was telling the truth. This creature had known from the beginning that helping humanity would cost her everything, and she had done it anyway. The fortress shook again. This time the shake did not stop. It rolled through the structure like a wave, and in some sections, the walls cracked. The Kalians were not trying to breach the fortress slowly. They were trying to destroy it completely. They were trying to eliminate the threat and erase any evidence that their hybrid creation had ever helped humanity. "Get me the security codes for the lower shield gates," Min-hai said suddenly. Her voice, though damaged, carried an authority that could not be denied. Jiwon moved to grant the request, but Teo blocked her. "She is a Kalian agent," he screamed. "She wants the code so she can open the fortress to the ships. She wants to let them inside." But Min-hai was already moving. Despite her failing body, she walked toward the main console. Her hands moved across the controls with knowledge that was clearly not human. Teo fired his weapon. The energy bolt passed through her body without resistance, as if she had become partially transparent. Min-hai did not stop. She did not even acknowledge the attack. Her fingers completed the sequence. What happened next was not what anyone expected. The fortress did not open to the invaders. Instead, the deep structures came to life. The ancient defensive systems that had been buried in the bedrock began to activate. Shields that had been designed to stop nuclear explosions hummed to power. The outer walls, made of material that was harder than diamond, began to reinforce themselves. The entire fortress became something alive, something awakened. "I cannot help you fight them directly," Min-hai said, her body now barely visible, fading like a ghost. "The Kalian technology is different from yours. Your weapons were designed for human enemies. But the fortress itself contains old technology. Technology from wars that happened before your species even discovered fire. I have reactivated it. The fortress will protect you now." Teo realized his mistake too late. Min-hai was not a spy. Min-hai was exactly what she had claimed to be, a defector, a helper, and now she was dying, having spent the last of her strength to save the people who had imprisoned her. The battle raged outside the fortress walls for 6 hours. Kalian weapons that could level cities bounced harmlessly off shields powered by technology from 1,000 years of galactic history. But the effort was destroying the shields, too. The power was draining. They could hold for another hour, maybe 2. Teo watched this happen on the screens, and for the first time in days, doubt bloomed inside him. He looked at the empty space where Min-hai had been. She had dissolved. Her body had broken apart at the molecular level. All that remained was the device that had controlled her, now just an empty piece of metal, an object with no purpose, a slave collar that no longer had a slave. Ji-won moved to stand beside Tae-oh. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were wrong," she said quietly. "We were all wrong." Above them, in the laboratories, Da-eun worked frantically to manufacture the antidote. She worked faster than anyone had ever worked before, because now, every dose of the cure she made was a tribute to the alien woman who had given her life. Not because she had to, not because she was forced, but because she had chosen to. The fortress held, the shields did not fail. And outside, in the black void of space, the Kalian ships began to retreat. They had come to silence a voice. But that voice had already left something behind that was louder than any weapon. It had left hope. The chemical compound shimmered in its container like liquid crystal. Da-eun held the vial up to the light and her hands trembled. This was it. This was the answer. This was the thing that could change everything. She had spent 58 hours without sleep, and her body felt like it belonged to someone else. But her mind was clearer than it had ever been. Every neural pathway in her brain was firing at maximum capacity. Every second of her life had led to this moment. Around her, the laboratory was a place of controlled chaos. Machines hummed and processed and manufactured. The antidote could not be made in just one place. It required a network of production centers working simultaneously. Da-eun had coordinated with scientists across the entire fortress. They were all making the same thing. They were all racing toward the same finish line, and they were all running out of time. Because even as the Kalian ships retreated, even as the shields of Fortress 7 held strong, the virus continued its work in the world above. The infection rate had reached 95% of the global human population. The bodies were still alive, still breathing, still moving. But the minds inside those bodies had broken apart. There was no one left to fight. There was no one left to run. There was only silence. The communications officer brought Da-eun a message from Commander Ji-won. It was simple and direct. "Ready the first batch for immediate distribution. Do not wait for perfection. Humanity needs hope now more than it needs certainty." Da-eun looked at the message, and she thought of Min-hai. The alien woman had been willing to use herself as an experiment. She had been willing to risk everything to prove the antidote would work. Da-eun had honored that sacrifice by moving cautiously, by testing thoroughly, by making sure that every dose was perfect. But Ji-won was right. The world was dying. Certainty could wait. Hope could not. Within hours, the first manufactured quantities of the antidote were ready. It was not the billions of doses that would eventually be needed. It was only 10,000 vials. Enough to vaccinate a small city. Enough to prove that the cure was real. Enough to give humanity something it had not felt in days. Something to believe in. The distribution began in the sections of Fortress 7 where the infected were being held. These were people who had been exposed to the virus before they could reach safety. They had been isolated in medical wings, carefully monitored, their minds slowly being eaten away by the cascade. They lay on beds in rows, some unconscious, some staring blankly at ceilings they could no longer understand. The nurses and doctors approached each patient with a syringe filled with the glowing liquid. They injected it carefully into arms and veins, and then they waited. Nothing happened for the first minute. The hearts of the medical staff sank. The antidote was not working. Min-hai had been wrong. The science had failed. Humanity would still die. But at the 2-minute mark, something changed. The first patient opened his eyes. His name was Sung-ho, and he had been infected for 3 days. He had forgotten his family. He had forgotten his own name. He had forgotten that the world even existed. But in that moment, as the antidote rewrote his neural pathways, he came back. His eyes focused. His breathing changed. He looked up at the nurse above him and spoke 3 words. "Where am I?" It was the most beautiful question anyone had ever asked. Within an hour, all 10,000 of the first batch had been given. Within 3 hours, 8,000 of those people had regained consciousness. They had not regained everything. They had gaps in memory. They had things that would take time to recover. But they had recovered the most important thing. They had recovered themselves. They had recovered the ability to think and to choose and to be human. The news spread through Fortress 7 like wildfire. In the common areas, people began to cheer. In the detention blocks, guards cried. In the command center, Ji-won allowed herself to smile for the first time in days. It was going to work. The human race was going to survive. But in the depths of the fortress, in a room that had been sealed away, something was happening that no one had expected. The device that had belonged to Min-hai, the empty control collar that had been left behind, was beginning to glow. The mutation that had destroyed her body was not complete. Some part of her consciousness had survived in the device. Some fragment of her mind had clung to existence. Dawn found it by accident. She was collecting research materials from the detention area when she noticed the light. She approached it carefully, knowing that it could be dangerous, knowing that it could be anything. But when she picked it up, she felt something. A warmth, a presence, a thought that was not quite her own. Images filled her mind. Memories of a woman watching her own body dissolve. Memories of a civilization built on stars. Memories of a choice made in a moment of clarity. And then, a simple message, a single thought spoken across the barrier between life and death. Thank you. Dawn fell to her knees and wept. She wept for Min-hai, who had sacrificed everything. She wept for the choice that had been made. And she wept for the knowledge that the sacrifice had not been in vain. The antidote would save billions of lives. The human race would go on. And Min-hai would be remembered not as an alien spy or a creature of fear, but as the being who had chosen to be human in the moment when it mattered most. The manufacturing process accelerated. Fortress 7 became a factory of hope, producing doses of the antidote by the thousands. As the quantities grew, Ji-won made the decision to send teams to the surface. They went in protective suits, moving through cities that were full of breathing ghosts. They injected the antidote into the arms of billions, and slowly, one by one, the minds of Earth came back online. Doctors remembered their training. Farmers remembered their fields. Children remembered their parents. Soldiers remembered why they had been fighting. The world was still broken. The cities were still damaged. The cultures that had been lost would never fully return. But humanity was awake again. Humanity was thinking again. And because of one alien woman's sacrifice, humanity had a future. In the command center, Commander Ji-won made a formal announcement across all remaining broadcast networks. She spoke of the virus and the invasion. She spoke of Fortress 7 and the scientists who had worked without rest. And she spoke of Min-hai, the hybrid creature who had crossed the stars not to conquer, but to save. She described how the alien had sacrificed herself completely, breaking apart her own existence to give others the chance to live. She was not born human, Ji-won said, her voice steady and clear. But in her choice to help us, in her willingness to die for us, she became more human than any of us will ever be. We will remember her. We will teach our children about her, and we will live in a way that honors her memory. Across the world, in hospitals and homes and hidden places, people heard these words. And they understood. The woman who had saved them was not one of them, but she had loved them anyway. And that love had changed everything.